Alright, we're going to be looking at division. And division is one of those things people always say, oh, I can multiply, I can add, I can subtract, but I hate division. And I always find that kind of a confusing statement because, well, I'm going to show you in a second, but multiplication and division are really similar. If you can't multiply, you can't divide, but if you can multiply, you're good on this. So I just want to go over some vocabulary real quick. This is your basic problem. It's 36 divided by 4, and the answer is actually up here. It's 9. And 9 is called, anybody remember what this is called? It's called the quotient. Any answer in a division problem is called the quotient. And 36 and 4, people always get the terms for these mixed up because they both start with the letter D. 36 here, you know what that's called? It's called the dividend, and then the 4 over here is called the divisor. So the dividend, that's the number that's being divided, and the divisor is the one that's doing the dividing, okay? And you might see division problems written as this. I like to call this a house. You can see that 36 is inside the house. Here we have another division problem, and again, let's look at those terms. So the 10 here, well, that's a number that's being divided, right? So that's called the dividend. And since the 2 is doing the dividing, that number there is the divisor. And then, of course, 5 is our answer, and that, again, is the quotient. Now, notice, on this one, there was a house. On this one, there was just this little sign here that we recognize as division. 2 ways of writing a division problem, and here's a third way. And you can see this is kind of like a fraction. Well, actually, it is a fraction. Fractions is just another way of doing division. So, again, this is the number right here that is being divided, so we call it the dividend. The 7, his job is to divide, or her job, depending on what gender you want to give the 7. So that's called the divisor. And then the 8 here would be your quotient, your answer. So if we were to look at this problem here, there's 3 different ways of writing 36 divided by 4. And you say, I don't get division. How does that work? Just think of it like this. 4 times what number equals 36? And like I said, if you know your multiplication tables, you're fine on these types of problems. If you don't know your multiplication tables, then you really should study those and get to know them. But you can figure it out, and we know that 4 times 9 is 36, and that's how we get our quotient of 9. Let's try another one here. Again, 3 ways of writing 10 divided by 2. You can write it as a fraction, that little division sign, or what I like to call the house there. Think of it like this. So we have 2 times what number is equal to 10? And we know that fill in the blank there has to be 5. 2 times 5 equals 10. So if we have a bigger problem, we call these long division problems. I don't know why they call it long. I guess you have to do a little bit more work. But we look at the 7 here, and we know 7 times 1, that gives us 7. And then 7 times 2, that gives you 14. So 7 goes into 10 one time. And you could tell that 14 would be too much. So then 1 times 7 is 7. So you have 10 minus 7 now. You get 3. And then you're going to bring down that 5. And you get 35. So 7 goes into 35. Well, if we could do this all out again, you'd realize that 7 goes into 35 5 times. And some people get confused with this process. It's just something you got to do a lot of practice with. But again, I don't need to know how to divide. I just need to know how to multiply. That's how I figure out how many times 7 goes into each thing. And I need to know how to subtract. But if I know how to do those 2 things, you're golden. And one more example here. 6 goes into 12 2 times. We knew it didn't go into 1. Some people, they like to put an X up there. If you want to put an X up there, that's fine. Just make sure it doesn't look like a decimal. Mine kind of looks like a decimal there. So 6 goes into 12 2 times. And then we have 6 times 2 is 12. And I'm going to subtract here. So 12 minus 12 is 0. And then we're going to bring down a 0, and that's 0. So you can't just leave this blank up here. You have to say, actually, 6 goes into 0 times. Otherwise, your answer would be that 6 goes into 120 2 times, and we know 6 goes into 18 3 times, so it's going to go more than twice. It goes in 20 times. So it's real important to remember that 0. And just one more problem here, just another thing to get some experience with. So 6 goes into 30 5 times, and we know 6 times 5 is going to equal 30. Now when I subtract 30 minus 30, I get 0. I'm going to bring down that 8, and 6 goes into 8 1 time. So 1 times 6 would be 6. Now I'm left here with 8 minus 6. I'm left with 2. Now if you know how to do this with decimals, awesome. We're in good shape. If not, don't worry about it. We're going to get there. For now, just say remainder of 2. And we put an R there in the number 2. So it's 51, and we couldn't quite get him to go in there a 52nd time, so we say that there was 2 remaining. And you're saying, well, why didn't you get a remainder on the 2 problems that we just did, these 2 problems here? I probably should have showed you. When you're doing these, 5 times 7 is 35, and add that off to the end there, 35 minus 35. That's going to give us 0 as a remainder. I probably should have showed you that the remainder for both of these problems was 0. I left that out, but that's why we got those. These went in perfectly, and this last problem, it didn't go in perfectly. And that's okay. That's part of math. Not everything's going to work out evenly all the time. If we had 4 people and 3 candy bars, we know that each person isn't getting a candy bar. That's the way math works, so that's okay.